The woman collapsed beside the red luxury car just as the rain began to pound against the pavement. Her hand pressed desperately against her stomach, her face pale with fear, while tears streamed down her cheeks. "I can't go," she whispered, barely able to breathe. Nobody stopped. Expensive cars passed the small auto repair shop, drivers looking away as if her pain were someone else's problem. But one man ran toward her without hesitation. His name was Daniel, a single father and mechanic who had spent his entire life fixing broken things. What he didn't know was that the woman trembling in front of him was a millionaire whose decision that night would change his life forever. If you believe kindness and second chances can change someone's life, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can become the beginning of an extraordinary story. Daniel had learned early that life did not always reward good people quickly. At 38, he was raising his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, alone. His wife had died 3 years earlier after a sudden illness, leaving him with a little girl who still slept with her mother's old scarf beneath her pillow. Daniel worked from morning until late evening at a modest repair garage on the edge of town. The garage belonged to his late father, and Daniel had refused every offer to sell it because it was the last place where he could still feel his father's presence. Money was always tight, but Daniel never complained. Whenever a customer couldn't afford a repair, he quietly reduced the price. Sometimes he fixed cars for free. His daughter often teased him that he was the worst businessman in the city. Daniel would smile and tell her that being rich was not about how much money you had, but how much goodness you could afford to give away. That rainy evening, Daniel was closing the garage when he noticed a black SUV parked across the street. A woman stepped out, looked around anxiously, and suddenly bent forward in pain. She tried to reach her phone, but it slipped from her hand and landed in a puddle. Daniel immediately ran outside. He found her sitting against the side of a red car, trembling. She was elegant, beautifully dressed, and clearly accustomed to a life far removed from his dusty garage. But in that moment, none of that mattered. She looked terrified. Daniel knelt beside her and asked if she was hurt. She shook her head and said she was having severe pain and couldn't drive. She kept repeating that she couldn't go to the hospital. Daniel didn't understand. She had the appearance of someone who could afford the best medical care in the city, yet she was terrified of entering a hospital. He asked whether there was someone he could call. She hesitated before whispering that there was no one she could trust. Daniel looked toward the empty road, then at the woman. He knew the safest choice was to call an ambulance, but she was becoming weaker by the second. The nearest hospital was nearly 15 minutes away. Without wasting another moment, Daniel helped her into his old service van. He called his neighbor to pick up Lily from school and drove through the storm as quickly as he safely could. The woman introduced herself as Elena. She owned a large investment company and had recently become one of the wealthiest women in the region. But none of that seemed to matter to her anymore. During the drive, she held her stomach and cried quietly. Daniel kept telling her they were almost there. When she apologized for causing trouble, he told her she had nothing to apologize for. He had lost someone he loved because help had come too late once, and he would never ignore someone who needed help again. At the hospital, doctors rushed Elena inside. Daniel remained in the waiting room, soaked from the rain and covered in grease from the garage. He had no reason to stay. He had done what any decent person should do. Yet something inside him refused to leave. He kept thinking about the fear in Elena's eyes. After nearly an hour, a doctor finally came out. Elena was stable, but there had been a serious complication. She had arrived just in time. Had she waited much longer, the outcome could have been tragic. Daniel closed his eyes in relief. Then the doctor asked him whether he was family. Daniel shook his head. No. I just found her outside my garage. The doctor looked surprised. Then you may have saved her life. Daniel simply nodded and walked away. He returned home late that night. Lily was asleep on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. Daniel carefully carried her to bed. As he tucked her in, Lily opened her eyes and asked whether the woman was okay. Daniel told her she was safe. Lily smiled sleepily and said, "Daddy, Grandma always said you were meant to help people." Daniel kissed her forehead, unaware that someone was standing outside his small house. The next morning, Elena arrived at the garage. Daniel barely recognized her without the fear and tears on her face. She wore a simple coat and held a small envelope. She thanked him for saving her life and offered him money. Daniel refused. She tried again, but he pushed the envelope back. "I didn't help you because I wanted money." Elena stared at him. "Then why did you help me?" Daniel looked at the old family photographs hanging inside the garage. "Because once, someone I loved needed help, and nobody came." Those words broke something inside Elena. She admitted that she had spent years believing money could protect her from everything. She had built a successful company after growing up poor, but success had cost her almost every relationship she once had. Her family had abandoned her after a bitter inheritance dispute. Her closest business partner had betrayed her. She had become so afraid of being used that she stopped trusting everyone. Daniel listened without judging her. For the first time in years, Elena felt safe enough to cry. Days passed. Elena began visiting the garage, first to thank Daniel, then simply to talk. She discovered that Daniel was struggling to keep the business alive because expensive equipment had broken down. She secretly offered to help, but Daniel refused any gift. Instead, Elena proposed something different. She would invest in the garage as a business partner, but only if Daniel agreed to run it himself. Daniel accepted. Within months, the tiny garage became a thriving automobile service center. Elena helped Daniel expand, while Daniel taught her something money had never taught her: trust. Lily loved Elena immediately, especially because Elena never treated her like a child who needed pity. She treated her like family. One evening, Elena sat beside Daniel outside the garage as the sunset painted the sky gold. She looked at the place where their lives had unexpectedly collided and whispered that she still couldn't believe a poor mechanic had changed her life. Daniel smiled. "You weren't poor when I met you." Elena laughed softly. "No. I was something worse." "What?" "Alone." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "So was I." Neither of them said anything after that. They didn't need to. A year later, Elena stood beside Daniel and Lily at the opening of their second garage. The little girl held Elena's hand while Daniel gave a short speech. He told everyone that success was not measured by the size of a bank account, the car you drove, or the house you lived in. Sometimes success was simply being the person who stopped when everyone else kept walking. Elena looked at Daniel with tears in her eyes. She had once believed she needed more money to feel safe. Instead, she had found something far more valuable. A family. A home. And a man who had helped her when he had absolutely nothing to gain. If this story touched your heart, please support the video with a like, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories like this to you. And before you leave, comment, "Kindness changes everything," if you believe one good person can completely change another person's life. Because sometimes, the person who saves you is not the richest, strongest, or most powerful person in the room. Sometimes, they are simply the one who refuses to walk away when you are hurting.